Teachers, what was the worst thing a substitute teacher did while you were gone? When I was a substitute, I got a lot of requested jobs because the substitute pool was poor. One such example given to me was a substitute who would just go to sleep. I barely believed it. Once I was teaching full time. I had a sub come in for a day. When I got back, my students told me that he told them to leave him alone. Sat down and went to sleep. I believed it then. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did, not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten and she said all the kids going to bathroom were interrupting the class. One girl wet herself. School policy was if kids under a certain age had an accident, the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper, to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wearing a diaper, calling her baby and such. The little girl ended facing repercussions at home too. It was devastating to hear about. I came back after being gone one day and my students told me the substitute teacher flipped over tables in a rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. What actually happened is that the sub left the room to take a 20-minute phone call and the kids thought it would be funny to flip the tables over. The substitute then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. Then, during lunch, my special ed co-teacher came into my room to set up and caught the sub making out with a student. Turns out she was 18 to his 25 and the 20-minute phone call was to set up the lunch meeting. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school my damn self. Edit. Wrong version of principal. 1. Asked a deaf kid to take off his hearing aids. Kids tried to tell her he needs to them, but to her they look like headphones. She cried when was confronted by another teacher. 2. When I was in 6th grade I fractured my wrist, but it was my dominant hand so I had to poorly write with my right. Teacher forced me to write with my left while I had a cast. I couldn't even grasp the pencil. Cried a lot. Then a couple months go by and got my cast off. Sub told me to suck it up and write with my left hours after getting my cast off. I felt like jelly and intense pain. Teacher was fired at the end of 7th grade because of unnecessary complaints. Gave out snacks I bought with my own money that I kept for kids who stayed after to get tutoring. Threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that kids broke in front of her. Which again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener for my room. Let the kids go through my things in my cabinets and desk. Lost a bunch of stuff that way. This happened to my colleague. But I was the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year after a unit on ancient Greece. There is mild nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie. But they were in the middle of the movie so there shouldn't have been an issue. He left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened. But the sub somehow managed to show both the nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie. The nudity scenes were hours apart and the class was only 40 minutes. Then, the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show nudity. When I was in 3rd or 4th grade, my reading group read MRS. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. Our reading teacher knew she was going to be absent. So she arranged for us to watch The Secret of Nim. We watched it over 2 days. And the substitute talked through the entire movie. She continuously compared the book to the movies. Or talked about what would have been better done. But never stopped the movie. And ruined it for us. And there were only maybe 8 of us. Then at the end of the 2nd day gave us a homework worksheet to fill in about the book versus movie. Most of us did poorly. Because we missed things due to the sub's near constant talking. If it wasn't for the fact that most of us did so badly. And complained about the sub. I don't know that our reading teacher would have believed us. Didn't do anything to the kids. Per se. But told the kids that the reason I was out was because my mom was having breast cancer surgery. I teach K5 and I specifically didn't tell the kids because I didn't want them to worry. So, when I came back, I had a bunch of kids come up to me asking about my mom, which was so sweet, but not something the kids should have had to worry about. Lost more than half of my textbooks that I purchased myself, as well as textbooks that were school property. Administration just shrugged at this, until they found out the textbooks belonging to the school were around $120 each. Also lost all the book assignments of 4 classes I asked him to collect so I could correct those at home. Kinda sucked for the students who did put a lot of work on it and didn't have digital copies. Also didn't teach anything that I asked him to, because he didn't really like the subject matter. Also didn't bother grading. When I checked the grades he had given out, there was only 1 grade and everyone was given 8/10. Even students that didn't take my class. There was a harpsichord in the front of the classroom used both for demonstration and performance. Not knowing what he was doing, the sub tried to tune 3 notes that had gone mildly out of tune while I was away. He managed to break the strings on all 3 notes and left a message inside reading, "Sorry about that. Full stop. Full stop." She let the kids run wild and do whatever they wanted. First graders. I was out because my dad died. Thank God my team realized what happened and all pulled together and cleaned the room, put it back together before I returned to work. Had a substitute teacher in my high school French class show a movie that was straight up softcore pornography but tried to explain that since it was in French it was artistic. It was equally frustrating because while I wanted to see boobs, I also couldn't stop reading the subtitles because I had to understand what they were saying. The teacher did not come back the next day. Update. I went through all the comments and looked at everyone who suggested what movie it might be and none of those movies were the one shown. This would have been in 2006 and the movie looked maybe late 90s or early 2000s. If I come across it, I will update this thread, but for all I know it could have been a porno in French. Not a teacher, but in the 4th grade. Our teacher had a baby and was gone for several weeks. The sub we had was an absolute witch. She had no patience for kids. She'd yell at us for stupid shit, ask us questions and or give us homework that was way above our tiny 4th grade brain levels and then complain and call us stupid when literally none of the kids did well on the work. One girl decided to get smart with her one day and she walks over and slaps the girl hard across the face, which of course sends the girl into a hysterical sobbing fit and says that's what your WH-ray of a mother should be doing more often. Being tiny, adorable 4th graders, we were all too afraid to tell anyone. We had to deal with that for 3 weeks until the main teacher came back. 2 things come to mind. 1. Tell the black children they need to speak more clearly because people think black people are hard to understand. 2. Just sit and play on the phone while class loses its mind. Casual racism coming from teachers is just the worst. I learned what the N-word was because my white music teacher taught my entirely white 3rd grade class an old historical German American song that had the N-word in it. She censored the word in the sheet music and had us just hum at that point in the song. But I had a friend who knew and told me about it. There's no reason to be teaching grade school kids a song with that word. And especially not without any context about why the word is bad. Not a teacher, but we had a sub for our science class. She didn't believe in science but pseudosciences. Was sexist to males. And because of her weird art would rip loud sulfur smelling farts all the time. Then get mad if we brought it up despite being fed new age hippie bullshit and being crop dusted. She also was a horrible sex ed teacher because she said women can choose when to have periods without birth control. He yelled at one of the only girls in my high school engineering class saying girls don't belong in engineering. He also kicked his feet up on the desk and read the paper the entire day. He banged a yardstick on a desk to get everyone's attention, then pointed it at the whiteboards with the daily objectives. All without saying a word. He disappeared at lunch and came back smelling like weed. These are all reports I got from my students the next day. This guy was a retired teacher. 2. My 9th grade English teacher was fired, which is an entire other story. And the school had difficulty finding someone to fill the spot. We would have random subs. But they didn't really teach us. So eventually we had a different person babysit us each day or week. One time it was the very scary principal who just glared at us like we were convicts about to escape. The school's police officers who at least talked to us. And various teachers for one-day stints. I don't know why one of our 5 librarians couldn't have been in there going through grade appropriate books at the least. We spent 2-3 months like that. I had left out overnight eggs that I was going to use in a science experiment the following day. I was out and thought nothing about it. I returned the following day and went looking for the eggs only to find them missing. Asked a student where they went and I was informed that the substitute took the class to the special education kitchen. Hard-boiled them and ate them. I went to talk to my AP and was informed that the sub had called in sick for her job for that day. Due to food poisoning. She was brought in to teach history. What did she teach? Geography. Like how? The worksheets I left were literally on Hitler's rise to power. Edit. I should have mentioned. She taught how earthquakes can cause tsunamis. Yes, it was interesting, but you had one job and it wasn't that. I had a cool Chinese lucky cat that went missing after I had a sub. My students said the sub seemed really intrigued by it. Talked about it several times. And even moved it from the shelf where it sat and brought it over to my desk. It was gone when I returned the next day. Not a teacher, but in 7th grade life science we had a sub. For the first 5 or so minutes of class he made us do a Kahoot. For anyone who doesn't know, Kahoot is a learning website that lets you take a quiz in a fun way. The only problem was that he told us every answer. Next we were supposed to be learning about parts of a microscope, but instead he got them out and told us to mess around with them and he broke one of them. After that he put a video up and ate my teacher's chocolate, then fell asleep for the last half hour or so of class. Needless to say, when our teacher got back and we told her about the sub, he was fired. Was a student. Our maths teacher went on leave for a while, I think maternity, and the supply teacher was absolutely useless. He'd been given one topic to teach us and that was it. For weeks. We had a whole textbook to be working through and I was gunning to take my maths GCSE a year early. But no. We just did a topic our class had got the hang of in a week. For 2 or 3 months. Because I guess he didn't know or bother to ask what we were supposed to be doing next. So the rest of the year we had to go ahead of the pace we were expecting to be able to cover everything we had to know. F-king supply teachers. Not a teacher. But in elementary school I had a bloody nose during class and asked to use the restroom. She said no and refused to let me go to the restroom. I think she didn't believe me. I sat there until the blood had spilled all over the desk. Then raised my bloody hand to be excused and only then did she allow me to go clean myself up. She even had the audacity to ask me why I didn't ask to be excused earlier. Which was a complete lie. As she definitely heard me the first time and even the other students pointed out that my nose was bleeding. When the teacher returned she was livid about what happened. I believe she complained to the administration to make sure the sub was never hired again. We legit do not use subs at my school. There are teaching assistants from pre-K kindergarten who will cover in a pinch. But more often than that, we just divide the kids up amongst the other teachers. Because yes, it is easier to handle 6 or 7 extra kids for a day than to pick up the pieces after a sub has blown through town. I was a sub at the time. Now a teacher. But I heard stories of one sub who fell asleep in the ice room and the kids escaped it. This sub was in a car accident and had brain trauma from it. He used to forget where he parked his car and had a bad sense of overall direction. This actually happened to the teacher in the classroom next door to me. But the sub started ranting about Democrats and talked about the Second Amendment. He took a stapler and told the students to pretend it's a gun. He then set the stapler on one of the desks and said that the gun could sit there for all eternity without hurting anyone as long as no one pulls the trigger. I mean, maybe. I could see this conversation happening in a social studies class. Given the correct context. But this was in a middle school science class. I'm not a teacher. But our substitute teacher gave us a task to write a story about any theme we liked. 4th grade, age 10-11. At the moment I was hooked on everything space related. The planets. The moon landing act. Too young to even remotely understand any of that. But this didn't hinder me to write a story about Apollo 11. I put my back into it and talked my father into typing it on the computer. Since I would have taken 3 days for that one page. Filled with pride, I gave the story to the substitute teacher and I got it handed back with a line across the paper. Stating that I didn't wrote that. No questions or anything, just a "you didn't do this." I know that any form of trying to convince her failed. Albeit that no adult person would write even remotely amateurish like I did. If my substitutes even showed up, they only occasionally followed the lesson plans I left. And I made sure to attach them to the online sign-up and leave them on my desk. It's like they looked at the lessons and said, "Nah." Double quote. I had to go out for surgery early 2019. I arranged for my predecessor, who I worked with for a long time in a different classroom, to take over for 6 weeks. I wrote meticulous lesson plans, with song lists and everything. And we had several meetings beforehand. First week. My daughter, I teach in a small district. I teach both of my kids, comes home and is singing F King Baby Beluga in the shower. My sub's favorite song to teach. A song not anywhere on my list. Apparently my entire lesson was scrapped and she spent the whole class teaching this song. So the worst thing that a friend of mine did was to teach my kid a song she tortured me with for weeks. I found out later she didn't follow any of my lesson plans. Which is a pretty common thing no matter what one teaches. Yes. She is still my friend. No. I do not request her as a sub anymore. Close bracket. Not a teacher. But I had a substitute teacher once who, at the end of our gym class, forced the boys, only the boys, to stay. When we asked her why, she said it's because some guys outside complained that someone was yelling and swearing at them. And that she knows it was a boy because it was a male voice. Girls can't talk in deep voices. Dot. No one fessed up and no one tattled on the person who did it. So, 20 minutes into the next period, the sub said she'd get us all suspended for a month and finally let us leave. The guy who did do it eventually confessed to the principal, depriving us all of our 30-day vacation. Bastard. Edit. My next period was history and I was pretty tight with the teacher. So he excused me, and the guys who came W me, for being late. I had a sub give out my cell phone number to my high school students so they could call me and give me excuses as to why they weren't taking their test while I was gone. I was livid. I complained to the sub office. And that teacher never subbed for my building again. High school student here. I was doing my own stuff and scratching my ear. And this guy with a heavy British accent called me over to his desk and scolded me for imitating him and being quite rude. When I tried to say that I was simply scratching my ear, he scolded me again for arguing against him and that if I said any more, I'd be sent to the principal's office. Needless to say, that day did not go well. He peed in my desk chair. Swear. 2. Got. He apparently peed in my chair and the students noticed it and mentioned it to him. He ignored them and just sat there anyway with a huge puddle of urine on the floor. The kids called security on him. I came in the next day and sat in the chair. It was wet and about that time a security guard stuck her head in the door and said, "Don't sit there. That guy peed in your chair." Double quote. Interesting opposite story. My first public school teacher, 4th grade, was a complete hardass. He didn't teach us science or social studies because he found them too fun, so our whole day was just math and grammar. We were all too young to realize this was weird, but when he got sick for a couple weeks the substitute very poorly hid a red face when she found put and had us make volcanoes and model teepees for the whole week. Not quite her fault. Sub got dosed with acid at lunch. It became a whole thing. Kids went ballistic. Troublemaker was actually the kid to say fuck this and got the principal. She was hiding under my desk when administration came in. It was not the first time it happened in the school. Ruined coffee for me forever. I finish all beverages before entering the building.